So my name's Jeff, first of all. So what's your name?
Andrew.
Andrew. All right, good to meet you. So yeah, what is your take on that question?
Could you repeat the question again?
So what do you think happens after we die, if anything? And then I'll ask more about how you got to that belief. So.
I believe in heaven. I believe you go to heaven after you die.
Yeah. And would you say you believe in a hell too? Like, is there a counterpart to that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And did you grow up in a certain religion, or?
Yeah, I grew up Christian.
And so have you always believed that? Like, would you say you've like heard it as a child growing up and have never doubted it?
Yeah, pretty much my whole life. That's just all I've heard, all I've believed.
Yeah. And would you say there's a difference between, say, people that go to heaven and some to hell? You know, like if there's two places, there must be people going to both.
Right.
How would they be different from each other?
I think in terms of like how they look, things that they like, other things, that makes people human, I feel like it'd be similar across both sides. Because what I've been taught is like the difference comes down to whether or not you accepted Jesus Christ as your Savior. But I mean, other than that fact, like there will be people of every race, demographic on both sides of heaven and hell.
Yeah. Was that something you've done? Like, so growing up in a church is always a difficult thing because you're kind of like growing into this knowledge rather than maybe being presented about Christ at some point later in life.
Yeah.
So, got any milestones on that journey? Or?
No, like significant events. I think it's just kind of been a process. Like kind of growing up in the church. You just think that you're just gonna kind of like be a Christian for the rest of your life. But then like there are definitely like trials that you face as you get to different stages, and then you kind of like fall away, come back. Maybe you don't come back, maybe you do, so it's definitely a continuous process.
I've been, especially if you look at the video channel, you'll see that I've talked to some people that come from pretty strong Christian or Catholic or Christian backgrounds who have basically tubed their faith, or just abandon it, whether for nothing or for other beliefs. I imagine you have some peers that have done the same thing, or not so much.
For the most, like there's definitely people I know that don't really go out to church anymore or anything like that. I feel like in those, at least for like people in my age group, like people that have stopped maybe coming to church, I don't know if their beliefs have necessarily changed, but it's more about just the act of going to church. I think like there's like a whole kind of stigma to it, and a little bit maybe if they had like bad experiences growing up in their particular home church or something, like with like being hypocrites about like certain things and like practices that were kind of like forced on them. But I feel like for the most part, it's not like they stopped believing in like the gospel. It's more about just like they're like doing other things with their lives, and maybe they don't have the time or the desire to go to attend services.
Distracted or just have other priorities. Was there ever a time? It's Andrew, right? Was there ever a time when you would say like you took ownership? That's kind of the way I've been learning to put it, because a lot of people, they move from their parents' faith to their own, and it's kind of a process of like taking ownership of it. How about for you? Is that something you can identify in your life, or?
I feel like like kind of once it's kind of on you to get yourself to church, like instead of like your parents driving you every Sunday morning, or like that's just kind of your routine. Like I feel like in college, that's kind of when you set it up, because like no one's gonna get you out of your dorm room and get you to church unless you wake up and get there yourself. So I feel like that's probably like the time at which most people, and myself included, kind of like had to start taking ownership of it.
It's just like a physical act. Like, you gotta get yourself physically there. And that's what I find out is for most people. Actually, lately it's been people who have kind of rejected the faith in their teens. but before that, it was more people were saying, yeah, when I went to college, I stopped going to church,
Yeah.
that sort of thing. So, what do you think would be the most difficult part of being a Christian?
Most difficult part.
I don't know if that's a fair question or not.
No, yeah, that is.
I don't talk to many Christians,
Right.
to be honest.
Okay.
Most people that I meet are not believers.
Okay.
So,
Well,
which really shocked me at first.
Oh,
I
yeah.
just thought, wow.
right. Well, like for me, yeah, like it would be a shock for me just because like pretty much a lot of people I associate with in my social circles are Christians. So it's unless I go out in the street and talk to completely random people,
Yeah,
I
which
probably
is what I'm doing.
encounter as much, non-Christians.
Yeah, it's like it's hard to believe like the Christian world has some pretty tight circles.
Yeah, I
And you get
that.
outside of those circles, and there are a whole lot of people out there that don't believe anything or have rejected it, or and it's a little scary or a little. I guess for me it was disconcerting. I don't know if that's the right word, but yeah.
But to answer your question, I feel like living in America, we have that privilege of not like really fearing persecution necessarily. So like that wouldn't be the hardest part of your faith.
Yeah.
I think like here our biggest problem is just like all of the distractions that comes with living in America.
Yeah.
And because of that, it's so much harder to stay focused on God like throughout the week. You know, like because like it's easy like your focus maybe when you're sitting in service and your phone's away, like outside of like that hour and a half every Sunday, like you're just like bombarded by like so many other things.
Yeah.
I feel like, you know, like kind of putting all that aside and finding time for him like on a daily basis, that's probably the hardest part for me.
Yeah, I think the Bible talks about that. Jesus said it's difficult for a rich man to enter the kingdom, and I think we're in our country, we're rich, I think about like what if we were maybe working class but poor, where to the point where you're like out working in the field all day long or working in a factory all day long, and all you got to think about is maybe your faith, because you're just kind of like your body's going through the motions, and it might be easier to be
maybe
to be a Christian, or at least to be focused. So how about sharing your faith? What are your experiences with that? Or your beliefs about it?
Right. I mean, honestly, like outside of this right now, I don't think I've ever really talked to a stranger about Christianity in general. Maybe like private discussions with friends occasionally, but like I've definitely been presented with opportunities, like just like outreach through like growing up in youth groups and stuff. Like we would have kind of opportunities like that, but otherwise, it's not really something I've been very comfortable with, or like I've really seeked out. That's just like not something I've ever been interested in.
Yeah. Do you feel like any kind of so you're not interested in doing it a certain way, or you're just not interested in people knowing about Christ? Like,
I think I've always felt like until I'm like secure in my own faith, like it felt weird to go out and try to get someone else to come with it. I feel like,
I mean, to be honest, that's very different from my experience. I when I became a Christian, it was like, this has to be shared.
Right. I
like,
don't think I've ever felt that really strong desire to go out and share the gospel.
Do you and just so you know, I don't feel like their salvation depends on me. It's more I guess more of an obedience thing. Like Jesus said, go and make disciples, that kind of thing. I guess, I don't know, like does your church promote sharing your faith at all, or? I'm assuming you go to church. Okay.
Especially my college ministry. I think that was like a very strong focus of it, and like that verse about going out and making disciples, like that was kind of like, I think, very foundational of ours. And then because of that, I think like we did a lot of like in terms of like using our money, we would support a lot of like missionaries and like those kind of like focuses, in terms of like what our church was doing in the community. But then I think my brother recently was telling me about, I think he said Park Community Church, how they have like kind of more focus on like community engagement,
Yeah.
and kind of like supporting like local families and that kind of outreach instead of like the global mission that I think that my college ministry had.
Mm-hmm.
So like, you know, like I see that the difference between churches and how they have different focuses, but they're still about, you know, like spreading the gospel just in terms of like what kind of like frame
Yeah.
you do it in.
Yeah, and different philosophies on that, and I think different people have different giftings. You know, I wouldn't say that I'm gifted at it, except for I'm interested in it. You know, that's what, like from the very beginning, it was like, how can I, you know, share my faith? And it wasn't until, you know, the last 10 years of my Christian life, I've been a Christian since, you know, teenage years, and that I really started to go out and talk to strangers. You know, so it was like, okay, what was I doing all the rest of that time? And for me, it was more, I guess you'd say, relational evangelism. You know, like trying to get to know people. And ran a youth center. And had, you know, kind of like a place for young, you know, whoever, mostly non-Christian young people to come and hang out. And I was always disappointed that they never really like asked me, you know, why are you different, or why are you so nice, you know, or whatever. And it's like, I guess the answer is because I'm not that much nicer than the average friend that they have who's not a Christian. You know, it's like, how can I distinguish myself? You know, how can I get them to be interested? And I finally realized that, you know what, who has the Holy Spirit? Not them. It would be me. Who needs to take the initiative? I do, you know. So that's kind of what got it started. So, well, thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
And
this is
I'll turn this off. I think I might have a